Hello, and welcome back to CP Stated, the podcast where we explore the people, ideas, and innovations powering progress for individuals with disabilities in New York State and beyond. On this episode titled Leveling the Playing Field, Gaming, Accessibility, and Inclusion with SpecialEffect, our communications and operations specialist Kelsey Massyk sits down with Jacob Holden. He's an occupational therapist from SpecialEffect, a UK-based organization that uses innovative technology to help people with physical challenges control video games, aiming for greater inclusion and quality of life. We discuss how SpecialEffect provides individualized setups using tools like the Xbox, adaptive controller, to help players with physical disabilities access video games for leisure and fun, advocating for accessible design in the gaming industry.
Hello and welcome back to CP Stated. My name is Kelsey. I am the Operations and Communications Specialist here at CP State. And we're here today talking about leveling the playing field, gaming, accessibility, and inclusion with SpecialEffect. And from SpecialEffect, I have Jacob Holden. He's an occupational therapist there at SpecialEffect. So first of all, hi, Jacob. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Could you tell me about SpecialEffect, your work there, how it's relevant to this field? Just go for it.
Sure. Yeah. So hi, I'm Jacob. I'm one of the occupational therapists working at SpecialEffect, which is the video game charity based in the UK. So my main role is to help players with a physical disability who are unable to access a gamepad, and help them to play games using alternative methods. So that is based on the person's physical movement, the games that they want to play, the consoles that they're on, and that gives us a good idea as to what kind of equipment might work best for them and what's most appropriate for them to be able to play games not only well but also comfortably as well.
Great. Yeah, so for those of you at home that can't tell the obvious, our friend Jacob here is joining us from the UK. I'm sure that'll kind of intersect differently with how things are addressed here in the US with, how we address disabilities and healthcare in general. But I think there'll be a good intersection and, maybe even some good discourse about that. But in general today, what we want to cover is, your mission at SpecialEffect, the programs you have, innovation with technology, that intersection I already mentioned, and, lessons for nonprofits and providers in the US and, maybe how we could adopt some of that. I find a lot that leisure in general is just like secondary, especially when the essentials are hardly covered here, sometimes not at all. And there's, already nonprofits trying to cover those holes as it is. So, would you mind going into like how SpecialEffect started to just jump in?
Yeah, of course. So our CEO, Dr. Mick Donegan, he had a background in teaching, and teaching people with a physical disability. So he would often help them with their educational needs, but then they would have the parents of his children come up to him and say, well, it's great that my child can access this technology for learning and educational purposes, but what about outside of school time? What about for leisure and fun? And Mick didn't really have an answer for that. And that's when he decided he thought video games would be a good one to look into because it's such an inclusive activity that millions of people would benefit from. And it also meant that millions of people were missing out from playing them as well. And so he wanted to bring that inclusion to those people. And that was one of the main reasons SpecialEffect came about.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I mean, and to me, I feel like, leisure, fun, that is really included in like the overall well-being of a human. It's insane that it's not necessarily thought of, as something that should be adapted for everybody. And maybe
Mm.
it's video games in general, I think, in this day and age have finally maybe become more of like a mainstream sort of thing. But I remember growing up, people that played video games were like still kind of nerds, you know?
Yes. Yes.
Um, so it's great to see that it's like it's not just a subset of people that are accepted here.
Mm.
Yeah. So I see that you guys use modified controllers, things like that. Could you tell me about, some specific things that you guys are using to work with people?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of accessibility controls out there now. And that's kind of really happened in the last, I'd say, 7 years since Microsoft released the Xbox Adaptive Controller and since Sony have released the PS5 Access Controller. These controllers, have been created in mind for individuals with disabilities.
Right.
And luckily, Special Effect were able to be part of the process and provide advice as to what we want to get out of these controllers to maximize the benefit for everybody because as we know, there isn't a one size fits all for anybody.
Yeah.
Every single person needs their own unique setup, particularly when you work with such a wide range of physical conditions. So, like cerebral palsy, for example, whilst you might have millions of people who have CP, you're not going to give the same setup to every single person with the same condition because CP, as we all know, is incredibly varied. There's
Yeah.
so many different presentations of it. And so it's always good to get all the information as possible as to the person's functional movement, because it might be someone might benefit from larger switches that they can use instead of using the smaller buttons on the regular game controller. We can position joysticks by people's chins, and they can use that instead of having to use the small ones on the controller, by people's feet as well. As long as someone's got a decent uh, range of movements, we can find some way to position some kind of equipment, whether it's going to be an accessibility switch or a standalone joystick, or even if somebody can access half of a game controller,
Yeah.
then we can kind of build on that and start to add on the other bits that they maybe can't access as well. So, the one thing we don't want to do is take away something that they can use well already for the sake of replacing it with an accessibility setup. If somebody can access a good amount of a controller that they're already using, we want to build on that so that at
Mm.
least they're using something familiar.
Gotcha. So it sounds like you do a lot of individualized work. So is it like on a case by case basis, you're working with that individual and seeing what works best for them?
Completely. Yeah. The way that we work is that someone gets in touch with us and then we can have a video call to provide suggestions as to what could work best for them. In a lot of cases, we can send out equipment to people based in the UK. We can send out this adaptive technology to them. If we find that it's a little bit more complex and we feel like we need to be a bit more hands-on with this person, we can actually go see the person at their home or at the hospital or wherever they're based in the UK. We can go and see them instead, because we've got so many boxes of equipment that we want to trial and error with them, rather than kind of post something out and then see how they get on with it. We want to make sure that the process is as smooth as possible with limited frustrations. If somebody wants to try out a bit of kit or a bit of equipment in the meantime, then they're welcome to do that. But we want to make sure that they're able to play, as quickly as possible without needing to try several different options before we get to a home visit. It's always an individualized approach that we take with each person. So we want to make sure that they are able to play to the best of their abilities, based on the information that they can give us.
Okay. So if you're an occupational therapist, where do you fit in like in particular in that process? Are you heading out to people's houses? What are you doing?
Yeah, so we do an awful lot of home visits over across the year. We cover the entirety of the UK, so that includes Wales and Scotland and Ireland as well. Um, and so it is just a case of just trying out a range of kit. And whilst my my title may suggest, therapist.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily therapy that we're giving to these individuals.
Okay.
The whole point of special effect is, as we've mentioned leisure, we've mentioned fun before, is to, as we know, video gaming is meant to be a fun, inclusive activity. We want to keep it that way for these people, because a lot of people that we see have so many clinical appointments,
Yeah.
and the last thing they want is
More
probably
work.
more work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and using gaming or gamification as a means for therapy, and to sort of promote movement. We're there to provide it as more of a comfortable activity instead. We want to make sure that they can access a switch without too much effort. Obviously, that if the person wants to use, a limb that they may not be using on a daily basis, they're more than welcome to. We just want to make sure that they're able to play as comfortable as they can, because we want them to share the enjoyment that somebody without a disability would also get if they're playing games. They play games comfortably, and can play for hours on end. We want to try and make sure that these people can play for as long as they're able to as well.
Hmm. Yeah, something you said, it hadn't really occurred to me is gamification. I think that's the word,
Hmm.
right? Yeah. So, I see a lot of posts, I do our social media here at CP State, so I'm reposting, other our affiliates and what they do. And, a lot of the greatest ideas are gamification of therapy, especially for, younger individuals that
Yeah.
getting a 3-year-old to sit down and do any kind of physical therapy is going to be a whole extra job on its own. And I
Hmm.
didn't think about that, like how much of therapy becomes gamified, so to speak, that,
Hmm.
I wonder if there is some sort of like, oh my God, I don't even want to play video games because it just keeps becoming therapy.
Sure.
But I I think that's an important consideration. Like, no, we're not making it more, oh, we're trying to fix you. We're just trying to
Hmm.
actually let you have fun, which is super important.
Totally.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, of course, removing any actual personal information, do you have like a particular example of somebody that, was really inspiring or like left a mark on you that you helped?
Yeah, there was somebody that we've worked with. He was on my caseload for about 5 years, and
Okay.
that's the one thing as well, is that we don't necessarily discharge a person from a caseload, because we give a lifelong service to these people. We can
Sweet.
adjust setups as and when we need to, because you might have people who have progressive conditions, or they
Mm,
might start off with a setup where it might involve two buttons and a single joystick, and then they might want to build on that and start to play more complex games that require more buttons and more joysticks. And so we want to make sure we're there for them for life so they can continue doing that. And that's the case with a person who I saw who started off using PS3 controller to play on Minecraft.
okay.
And then they were using these very light touch switches called ultralight switches. And he was able to sort of the buttons that you couldn't reach on the PS3 controller, we then swapped out for a few ultralight switches, which was sort of placed around the controller where he did have the movement to access them. So we just used Velcro and we stuck the buttons on the controller, and he was able to do that. But then he ended up progressing. And so we had to drastically change his setup, where we placed a joystick by his chin, and then he had several of these ultralight switches by his fingers instead. But with Minecraft, you need to use ideally two joysticks so you can navigate the camera and the character, and also have, quite a lot of the controller to get all the actions in the game.
Yeah.
There's a really cool feature on the Xbox adaptive controller, which is you can turn into what we call a shift button. So you can kind of have one layout where you might have the joystick acting as the character movement, and you might have switches acting as A, B, X, and Y on Xbox. But then with this shift button that you plug into the adaptive controller that you can set up through the Xbox settings, if they pressed it, the buttons and the joystick would do something else completely different. So instead of having, two joysticks and 12 buttons, we instead condensed it to one joystick and five buttons. And in the shift button, you can toggle between the two
Oh,
setups so that you can move freely by just pressing the button to then swap between moving the character and moving the camera. And the same for like performing other different actions as well. It's a really cool way to be able to allow someone to play quite a complex game, and still be able to, not have as many buttons as the game demands. But
Yeah.
the good thing about Minecraft is that the pace of the game really lends itself really nicely to allow that. Obviously, there might be some games that are a bit more fast paced and a bit more intense for that kind of setup, unless you're really quick.
Yeah.
So, not to say it's not impossible, but when there's no timed elements to it, it just makes that kind of setup a lot more feasible for more people.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine like the devastation that somebody would feel as their, condition progresses and they're like losing access to something that you love. So that's really great that you're over time, like staying with people as they need it. It's,
Hmm.
you know, like I'm just like as you're speaking, I'm like putting myself in that position and I'm like, yeah, these are things I never really, you consider these very specific situations. Like I don't play any RPGs or anything like that, but like I play like city builders and I'm like,
Sure.
I'm really slow, but like, I can't imagine if I didn't have that range of motion or if I had a limited range of motion and then it became more limited even. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, I
Yes.
don't know. That would just, you guys are great. You're doing a good job.
Oh, thank you very much.
Um, so with the controllers that you guys are making, do you ever have to like work with the manufacturer specifically, or do you just kind of make it work on your own? How does that collab work?
We used to do a lot of welding and breaking apart controllers ourselves. Since then, as the kind of accessibility landscape has gotten better,
Yeah,
more products are available. We tend to buy stuff off the shelf. One of our main suppliers is a guy called Barry who works at One Switch. We often buy a lot of his joysticks. Um, and they're really useful for, such a wide range of people. And so we try and make things so they are less, you know, um, bespoke and more to do with items that you can procure quite easily that you can just buy off the internet. And like with the production of the adaptive controller for the Xbox and the PS5 access controller, that's made things even easier to for someone to get their hands on as well. Because years ago, we were working with people who were or with suppliers who would be, in their sheds building
yeah,
these really bespoke controllers that would often take a lot of labor and really high cost controls as well. And
mhm,
so it's really positive to see these larger companies, who make these amazing games but not have the means for the people to play them,
yeah,
to sort of take this more seriously. And so it's just made things way easier to be able to adapt a controller for a person, and one that is an official controller as well, because we would spend quite a bit of time having to just get the tech working
yeah,
before the adaptive controller even came out. And so thankfully I joined a charity when the adaptive controller was around, so I've had a pretty easy ride since being here. But it's been really, really cool to see all different kinds of controllers and the technological landscape just expand quite exponentially, I'd say, because accessibility is becoming quite a hot topic, I'd say,
yeah,
across the last few years, and people are just becoming more aware that it's something that needs to be taken, seriously, because there's so many people that are missing out on a lot of things like gaming, like technology, because of these little sort of unintentional gaps in the
yeah,
market. And it's nice to be able to fill those gaps and to be able to enable these people to access technology like, millions of other people can.
yeah. Um, so, you mentioned all the innovations that are going on and like I guess modularity is a word that's coming to mind that, makes your job a lot easier. What's still remaining as holes? Like what are places that you're hoping for more innovation in the future that would make your job even easier?
Yeah, well, because it's one thing to look at the hardware. There's so many different bits of kit out there that can benefit a lot of people, but it's also the software as well that we like to look into. So when we look at a game, the first thing that I always look for is an accessibility setting option.
Right.
So anything that can make the game easier, or not necessarily easier, but just more accessible for people. So whether that's kind of turning off QuickTime events in games where you don't have to rapidly press a sequence of buttons, um, and if you don't do it quick enough, then you fail the level. Um, so many games have now included that kind of option, like Spider-Man in recent years, where you can kind of skip the cutscene or skip the QuickTime cutscene altogether, or you can change it so that it's a button hold rather than having to repeatedly press buttons over and over again.
Mm,
So that's why we created what we call a special effect dev kit, which is essentially a tool that we can send to games companies and games developers, and just provide them a range of resources that can help make games more accessible from a physical perspective. We're not saying you have to include all these settings. We're there to kind of provide the tools and say, you do what you want with these. We're
mm,
not here to sort of advocate. We're just here to just leave things with and let people make their own decisions. Because at the end of the day, if someone's making a game, we want to be able to say to that person, don't lose heart in the game. But if you kind of include accessibility at the core of the design, then it makes things much easier in the
yeah.
future, particularly with people who might not be being able to access that game without these settings.
Right. As a fellow tech nerd myself, I'm just thinking about all the games that I play that even just getting the devs to fix the game to work for anybody
Sure.
is something that must be kind of challenging. Do you get like pushback ever, or are people pretty generally, or at least pretending to be open to it?
No, I think because of the context we provide it in, we don't just say
Mm,
you should put the setting in and then leave it at that.
yeah.
We like to provide context behind why these settings are so important. Because so many people would who have fatigue issues,
Yeah.
can't play for very long, or the games are too complex and they have too many buttons to press. It's just providing those real life examples that I think really hit home and then makes people think, oh, okay, it's because you just don't think otherwise that these
Yeah.
situations are occurring unless you're made aware of them, right? Because I knew nothing about accessibility in video games prior to joining here. I'm lucky enough to pick up a game controller and just play without
Yeah.
having to, think twice about it. Whereas for so many people, that's just not the reality at all. And that's why I think that's what makes this job really personal. Because if I lost the ability to game, that's a huge part of me lost. And I think
Right.
like so many people can agree with that. And so it's just super nice to be able to give the gift of gaming to the people that we see. Because we are so passionate about it. Everyone at Special Effect, we've got a lot of gamers who work here, and it's really nice to pass on that passion to the people that we work with.
Right. Yeah, that must be like a really nice sort of almost like a club, just like everybody that's on the same page likes the same thing.
Totally.
I do the IT at the office, and sometimes it's really hard when, you know, there's no love. There's no love for
Mm,
computers or anything like that.
completely.
Um, and I just thought of a random sort of question. You're making a controller for somebody. Is that um like applicable to more than one game, sort of, or are you designing a controller or, some sort of modification for a particular game in mind?
Yeah, it depends on the person, I guess. People will have a particular game in mind that they want to play. So some of the big hitters include Call of Duty,
Mhm.
FIFA, or what is now known as EAFC,
Right.
Grand Theft Auto, racing games. And so we would, if someone wants to play like a racing game, for example, and they haven't mentioned anything else, then we would probably give them access to that racing game. But obviously, they can get back in the future and say, "Oh, now I want to play Red Dead Redemption," and
Right.
then that requires more buttons and more joysticks. But we can work with them to be able to achieve that. So we do get a lot of people though who have such a wide range of games that they play that require the entirety of the controller, and so
Mhm.
we try and give them as much access to the controller as we can. So trying to give them as many access to switches, as many joysticks, or if there's a particular controller they can use, if we can use that instead. Even something like voice controls can be an option for people as well. So there's loads of different options to help people to be able to play games. And like I mentioned before, in one of my examples, being able to kind of toggle through different control setups on the fly is also good option. I mean, we could even put on what we call scripts on adapters so that I guess they kind of work like macros on a computer where you
Yeah.
kind of press a button and it'll complete like a sequence of buttons inputs. So that could be quite good for like fighting games where you have particular characters that
Yeah.
have quite complex combo attacks. And so it's we've got so many different options that can enable these people to play these games.
Okay. I'm gonna kind of shift slightly. Um,
Mhm.
so I think I mentioned this to you when we, kind of pre-spoke before the episode, but we're an association. We have our affiliates. They're individual nonprofit agencies that, serve their individuals directly.
Mhm.
And, a lot of them have day programs, they've got their therapies, they cover the whole gamut. Do you, and this is just like an ignorant American question, I feel like, but what's the comparison over there? Do you guys have a similar kind of agency setup ever where you're working directly with an agency, or you're just on a specific individual purpose or uh basis? That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, we try and keep it as really individualized and one-on-one as we can,
Okay.
just so that if we're directly in touch with the person or the person's carer or parent or guardian or whoever, it just means that communication is more fluid and more,
Sure.
one way rather than going through other people. Obviously, we can work with, hospitals or care homes who do have general managers or other healthcare professionals that they speak to as well. If we can speak to the family member, that would be ideal because obviously that person is with them all the time or
Yeah.
more of the time. So it's just to kind of speed up the process and try and cut out any kind of, mini frustrations that might occur along the
Middleman.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. Okay. And so we talked earlier about how recreation can feel sort of like an extra, like an add-on. Do you ever still get in the world like the need to convince somebody that having fun is still actually an essential human sort of function that needs to happen?
Yeah, do you know what? I was surprised when I started working here that people have really embraced gaming as a leisure activity and are not seen it as this taboo topic. I do
Yeah.
feel like it's got a lot more positive response over the last couple of decades, I'd say. And you know, everyone's got a right to play. I think that's what the UN has stated before. And as an OT, as an occupational therapist, we like to look for what we call the occupational balance
Mm,
of things. So we've got one of them being self-care, one of them being things like work balance, and the other one being leisure. And the point is, you're meant to be sort of having that equal balance between those three topics. And so it's really nice to be covering the leisure side of things because we get to have fun ourselves as well in
yeah.
doing it. And it's just super nice to be able to help these people to play fun or play fun, to be able to have fun with gaming because, a lot of people are housebound. They can't do a lot of these physical activities. And more often than not, they're watching TV but they want to have something more interactive, which
Mhm.
that gaming can provide. And so it's really rewarding to see a smile to seeing someone play who has either not been able to play because of their condition or they have been able to play and something's happened along the way in their lives
Right.
and they can get back into it. And so, whatever their journey has been, it's incredibly rewarding to be able to be a part of them, sort of, getting that meaningfulness in their life, I think.
Yeah. So, I know your services, they're offered free of charge, which is great. How is your work funded? I mean, I know I stumbled upon you guys as my nerdy little self. I was on Steam and I saw that the one special day thing. Do you do just industry partnerships like that, grants, donations? How do you guys stay afloat?
We've got a dedicated fundraising team who specializes in running these events. Without them, we just crumble, I'd say, because they keep the money coming in. So anybody can sort of raise money for us in their own way. We've got events like Game Blast. It's where we every February we ask people to do anything game related, whether that's kind of gaming marathons or doing some bake sales that relate to gaming. Anything that is game related, we encourage people to do, and that's one of our biggest events. And like you said, one special day as well is also one of the hard hitters because we rely on a lot of the games links that we have, a lot of these games companies who are so generous with their donations. But there's also just loads of events that are put on throughout the year to keep us coming too. Um, and obviously we need to keep our support maintained as years go by. But it's ever so important that we've had our fundraising team because we are 100% reliant on donations. We don't get anything from government. We've been doing everything ourselves, and it's really nice to be able to have that independence that to keep ourselves afloat.
Yeah, that is certainly a challenge a lot of our affiliates have.
Totally.
They're funded, of course, yeah, by the kindness of a lot of people,
Mm.
sponsorships, organizations and such, but a lot of their pay comes from straight from like Medicaid. And,
Yes,
it's that's kind of what we end up doing is advocating with the government, like, hey, they need food too.
exactly.
Um, on that note, now granted, I don't expect you to know a whole bunch about, how the US handles healthcare and things like that. But, from your perspective, do you think that there's any like lessons our nonprofits or agencies could sort of take from you guys, or if they were interested in kind of starting a gaming access sort of program, where do you think they should start?
Yeah, I think it's always good to take a look at resources and just see what's out there if you're interested in that stuff. We have provided quite a few resources. So I know I mentioned the dev kit, but I also mentioned, or I should mention about our other website called Game Access,
Okay.
which is a website which has a range of articles about different kinds of equipment that we use. We often have a lot of YouTube videos filmed here as well to showcase particular equipment. So we can showcase the stuff that we use daily. It's really good to kind of show people what is available to the wider public because it's not like we've got some sort of secret shop where we get all this from. We
Yeah.
want to be able to, you know, disseminate this information to people in case they want to know where we get it from. But as well as equipment articles, there's also particular games that we look at as well. So if there's a game that's got really good accessibility settings or accessibility options, we like to do a real deep dive into that and just showcase what can be done. For example, like in FIFA, normally you need to use the entire controller to play the game. But since FIFA 19, I think it is, and continuing all the way to the latest EAFC, they've got this thing called a one button mode and two button mode, where you can play the entire game using just one joystick and one button, or two buttons and one joystick. And that is an incredibly important setting to have, particularly because FIFA and EAFC are one of the biggest games that we see people with. So it's really, really nice that we've been able to continue helping people to play that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm looking at the time and I feel like I've taken up enough of your day, especially since, you're 5 hours ahead. You're probably trying to go home soon. So what I will ask is what's next for Special Effect? What's coming up? Do you guys have any, upcoming partnerships I can direct people to, or, what's new for the future?
I would say that Game Blast 2026 is upcoming in February. So if anybody's interested in getting to know more about Special Effect, you can look at our website, which is specialeffect.org.uk. And we also I should say as well, we do also do support people worldwide as well. We don't necessarily send out equipment to individuals outside
Okay.
the UK. However, we can still provide support and provide you, signpost you as to where you can get bits of equipment, and just see how we can advise you to play games easier if you have a physical disability.
Oh, that's actually interesting to know. I don't know how I didn't notice that before. Okay, great. Well, do you have anything else you want to send us off with before I thank you for joining us and all that?
I would say, what I tend to say at the end of these kind of discussions is that if ever you're wanting to play a game and you feel like it's too difficult, I always would recommend taking a look at the settings, the options, the controller options in the game, because there might be little things in there that can help you make playing it a bit easier, whether it's kind of turn in button holds into button toggles, or whether it's being able to remap the controller so you can move the controls around within the game. Anything like that. It's just worth just taking a look at. And if not, then you can maybe take a look at our Game Access website and see if we've got any videos on the games that you might like, and see what kind of settings are available in there as well.
Yeah, good advice.
Thank you.
So now I'll go into my thank you portion. Thank you again for joining. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat, and I hope you have a happy new year.
Thank you very much, and you too, Kelsey.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of CP Stated. We hope you enjoyed learning about the critical role of accessible gaming in promoting inclusion and overall well-being with Kelsey and Jacob from SpecialEffect. For those interested in their work, Jacob noted that SpecialEffect is 100% reliant on donations and runs events like Game Blast every February. They also offer support worldwide, even if they don't send equipment outside the UK. You can learn more by visiting their website, specialeffect.org.uk, and check out their resources on accessible equipment and games at their other website, Games Access, at gameaccess.info. Don't forget to catch all the CP Stated and CP Short Stated episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and most other major podcast platforms. New and exciting topics will be shared in both audio and video formats as we continue to explore the disability service field.